The Brewers are going to have a hole in the infield at third base because we all assume Ortiz is moving to short once Willie takes his big contract. What are they going to do about it? We'll talk with Matt Carroll coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, Willie, how are they going to replace those 32 home runs? That's huge. You know, I get some criticism where I say, I want my third baseman hit 30 home runs. Yeah, those guys are few and far between, but you got to find a way to get that big bat in here somehow, don't you? I mean, you can't take a step backward. Chuck Freeman, longtime sportscaster in the state of Wisconsin and proud host of Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Matt Carroll from Just Baseball is going to be joining us here in a little bit. FanDuel, our sponsor today, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. When you win that first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Matt Carroll, who's now at JustBaseball.com, his new place of residence. Matt, appreciate you coming on the show, and happy holidays to you, my friend.
Absolutely, you as well. Nice to, I know we've been outside of baseball season for a bit, but good to talk Brewers again.
Yeah, it is. It is. I always say, the hot stove league when, you're at Wisconsin, it's just bad weather out here and all that. And, I just hope that the offseason gets bumped up here a little bit, where we get things rolling a little bit, because it has been pretty dead so far here in the last month and a half. God, it's been a month and a half since that season died against the Mets. Do you believe it's that long already?
I mean, yeah, I guess I've been watching a lot of football to try and get that all out of my mind. But yeah, it is crazy that it's been a month and a half, especially since, like you said, not a whole lot happening. I know, Brewers kind of saved some guys from Rule 5 recently, and that's kind of the most recent news. And they had one signing right after the season was done, and that was about it. So it's nice to have the hot stove kicking back up again.
It certainly is. And one of the big storylines, Willy Adames. He's not taking a home down discount. He's not coming back to the Milwaukee Brewers. Pat Murphy said as much the other day that he's not counting on Adames, and I don't think anybody really is. So at the top, Matt, I said, how are the Brewers going to replace that production? Can they replace 32 home runs?
You can't guarantee you're going to replace it without paying for it. And I think, as we know, the Brewers, they're already kind of committed to Rhys Hoskins for next year because he ended up opting into his contract option for 2025. And so, you've got Brandon Woodruff coming back. You've potentially got some other big names in there that you're paying, like Yelich still and Savali, depending on what the decision is with him in terms of a tender, non-tender. So I would find it hard to believe that they would just go out and sign someone who's guaranteed to give you 30 homers and around 100 RBIs. So then how do you do that? Do you piece it together? Is there something internal? Is there someone external who can get you close? And I'm not sure. It's going to be tough for that one. I don't know that they have the pieces internally to do it right now.
Yeah, my fear on this, Matt, is they're going to find some retread to come over and play third base. And then we got to look at this guy all season long and say, geez, here we are. The Milwaukee Brewers cannot spend again, and we're trying to make something out of nothing.
Right. I think everyone's pretty much on the same page there, that you've got the high odds are that Joey Ortiz ends up moving to short. Bryce Terang stays at second, even though he can play short. He's a Gold Glover at second base. I mean, he's a whiz over there. So you got your strong up the middle defense, and then you end up filling in at third. Where I mean, Joey Ortiz, he's more, seems like a more classic shortstop anyway.
Yeah.
But what do? You look out on the free agent market, and obviously you've got Alex Bregman, and that's not going to be within the Brewers' signability. Other than that, you've got like a J.D. Davis and a Gio Urshela. Are those the guys that really get you excited? I don't know that they are. So what do you have internally down in the minors? You've got Wes Clark. I don't know that he's necessarily ready yet. Brock Wilkins still far away. And then on the 40-man, you've got Tyler Black that you could consider. You could try the the experiment with Sal Frelick at third base. But again, you're just kind of piecing this together. And not that the Brewers haven't had success at some positions in doing that. I just don't feel like third base is necessarily the position where you would like to. You got a nice surprise out of Joey Ortiz. You had a good year a few years back with Luis Urias, but you weren't really planning. That's not classic third base either.
No.
Brewers haven't really had that since Travis Shaw.
Well, that's it. That, you know, Urias started at third base a couple of years ago, and then we were like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And in the last season, Ortiz had to play third base. There was no other real options at third base, and they failed. I think they failed in last, because we talk a lot about, well, the Brewers haven't had a first baseman. It's fielder, and we think maybe Hoskins, still jury. I don't know. We'll see. He comes back from the knee, but the third base spot has been wide open too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you know, Travis Shaw is the last one I can think of who, like a truly solid one for more than 1 year, like more than a 1 year fill-in. He was really good there for a couple of years before he started to tail off. But I mean, gosh, like thinking back, you might even have to go back farther than fielder. Aramis Ramirez good at the beginning of the 2010s, but again, that was just a year and a half maybe. You have to go a long ways back before you can find someone the Brewers had consistently at third base as an answer. So, and I don't know that there's an obvious one here. You've got some guys developing in the minors, but none of them are like guaranteed to be ready next season. So they may end up piecing it together. Or you know what? It's Matt Arnold. There could be someone out there we're not even thinking of who, you know, either has a little bit of third base, but it's not his primary position, or someone they teach it to. I don't know. Maybe that ends up surprising us, but there's obviously no clear option for him right now.
Ryan Braun, maybe Paul Molitor.
Right.
Paul Molitor at 65 years old probably could still go out and get himself.
He looks solid. Robin Yount too. I mean, both of them don't look a day over 50, right?
Yeah, no kidding. All right, we're talking Matt Carroll here on Locked On Brewers. So you think they'll piece together at the third base spot? Is that what you're leaning right here? And on top of that, maybe Devin Williams, I was thinking, to Philadelphia, and would you get Baum and maybe a package deal?
I've seen him rumored as someone they might be considering. I certainly wouldn't be against something like that. Another thing too, you know, we talked about being a little bit early here in the off season. There's the non-tender deadline is today, and not only the Brewers but 29 other teams are going to be potentially, you know, non-tendering some players as well. Will there be anyone who ends up on the market that we're not talking about right now because they're currently with a team? Who could end up out there for the Brewers to snag? We'll have to see, I guess. But I think most likely it seems that they, you know, try and piece it together between a lower level free agent signing and with what they already have. But they've surprised us before. So if there is an answer at third base, it's not an obvious one right now, and one that, you know, we might see and go, oh, okay, I can see that working, but it hadn't popped up earlier this offseason.
The Brewers are bringing back a backup catcher. We'll get back to that coming up next here. We continue on. Matt Carroll is our guest here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Good to have you along here as we roll into the holidays. Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action over the next couple of days with the #1 sports book in America, because new customers, you bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets. It's that easy. All you got to do is win that $5 bet. They're going to deposit $150 into your account. And of course, so you're sitting around and you're seeing you're watching all the games this week, and you get a hunch in the middle of the game that, hey, I want to live bet this game. This team should be winning. They're down by 10 points. Well, you might get a pick 'em on that. Who knows? View all the live play-by-play, get out the latest stats, and make your decisions on the same page where you place your bets on FanDuel.com. Join today. Again, you get $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. But hey, they have all the sports on there. And, you know, Thanksgiving week, wow, everything coming together. College basketball, the NBA, college basketball tournaments everywhere, the NBA, college football, some great matchups coming up. You name it, it's all there, and it'll be all on FanDuel. But check out their live betting, especially with the NFL. Never waste a hunch. You make more, every moment more with FanDuel, official sports book partner of the NFL. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Matt Carroll joining us right now. Devin Williams, where is he going to end up? We talked a little bit about Philadelphia there, but what are you seeing there?
I think it makes a lot of sense right now to make that trade. Philly seems like a really solid landing spot. I know that talking about teams who piece things together, they actually pieced together the back end of their bullpen really well last year with guys like Strom and Hoffman. They ended up having an NL record amount of pitchers make the All-Star game last season because of the way they kind of crafted it. But I'm sure they would love to go back to having that main guy at the back of the bullpen. And as we know, Bohm, they're considering possibly shopping him around, and he would serve a need for the Brewers. So that could be something that works out for both sides. The Brewers could also opt to keep Devin Williams. The whole reason that they declined the second year of his option, and even though they haven't said as much, you can assume as much, is that they figure that they can end up paying him less in arbitration based off the fact that he missed a good chunk of the season last year, which meant that his save totals obviously were much, much lower than the year before. They can afford him a little bit more than they would have off of that contract option. So maybe they think he's affordable and they keep him. But if they do end up moving on from him and trading him to someone who wants that guy and thinks that maybe they can sign him to an extension, that's a position where the Brewers are perfectly well set up. You've got a Trevor McGill. You've got Abner Uribe coming up. You've got Mizorowski looked good in AAA towards the end of the season. Maybe they keep him in the bullpen and bring him up and try to throw him in the mix at the back end. Payamps came on strong at the end. I don't think he ends up saving games, but he could end up being in that mix once again for the Brewers if they tender him a contract. They can get by. It's hard to say that it's easy to replace the production of a guy like Devin Williams, who is multi-time All-Star. But if anyone can do it, it's the Brewers, their pitching development, and the strong base they already have built at the back end of the bullpen. I like
Uribe. He's coming off knee surgery. He got shipped down. He got in that fight, and we never saw him anymore. that was the end of Uribe. But he plays with some flash. I like the way he throws. I love like a lot about him. I want to see Uribe stick around.
Yeah, think about this. Guys like Abner Uribe and Brandon Woodruff. It's like we're getting excited for a couple years ago, and now we've got these guys coming back. Additions to the Brewers this next season, even though they're already technically with the team. That's some great firepower to get, 2 bits of great firepower to get. But don't forget, Abner Uribe, he was already being thought of a potential closer of the future for the Brewers. You get him back good and healthy, another year of maturity, another year of just, development. And I know he sat out most of last year, but you get to observe, you get to continue working with the Brewers coaches and whatnot. He could be an underrated piece, a guy that a lot of Brewers fans aren't thinking of, who could end up being big for them next year.
And you mentioned Brandon Woodruff. We don't talk a lot about Brandon, but he's kind of like the X factor there where, if he returns the Brandon Woodruff that we all know and love, man, that is a wonderful piece to add to that starting rotation.
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what you're going to get because at him, being around 30 and having that shoulder surgery, which has been that specific type of shoulder surgery has been tough on some other pitchers. But Brandon Woodruff is a bulldog. Like if anyone's going to be able to come back and be solid, I feel like it's going to be him. And if he is, now all of a sudden you're back to having 2/3 of that big 3 at the top of the rotation again with Woodruff and Freddie Peralta. All of a sudden, okay, we've got what seems like a quote unquote normal rotation again after kind of how they were able to piece it together last year successfully, mind you. But I don't think the rotation at the end of the year was what any fan was expecting.
No, but if you look at the rotation last year, they went through the whole season without a legitimate ace. They may say Freddie's an ace, but Freddie's not an ace. At least this point, and he may never have. But I'm talking about a guy who is going to go out there and you feel great about him. Not that we don't feel good about Freddie. You just don't feel the same way as when a Burns or Woodruff when he's healthy out on the mound.
Right. No, I agree. And luckily, the Brewers, again, we've talked year after year after year about their pitching developments. And if anyone can get by without having a true ace, it is the Brewers. And you kind of think back, I think there were a few people who made this observation last year as well about how last year's team kind of looked a little bit like that 2018 team where it was, more reliant on the offense than some of the years prior and had a starting rotation that kind of just got the job done. Like your ace in 2018 was what, Julius Chassin? Like it wasn't exactly guys out there who, you thought were an ace. But they were able to get it done. And last year they did the same thing. So imagine coming back next year with a functional offense and a Woodruff Peralta at the top of the rotation. That could be exciting.
Whatever became of Mr. Chassin? Colorado, and then that was it, right?
Colorado. I always mix up. I feel like when I'm thinking about those old pitchers, him and Willy Peralta. So I think Peralta ended up out in Detroit, not Chassin.
A few stops, I think.
Yeah, and recent too. But I don't know. Chassin these days, I'm not sure.
Yeah, not at all. Matt Carroll joining us. I'm worried about a slippage. We all should from the 93 games. I think that they kind of overachieved this past year. I'm not expecting 93, 94 wins again. I just think a lot of things went right for them last year, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're going to have to expect a lot of things to go right for them next year, and those things would include Christian Yelich being something close to fully healthy for a season, Garrett Mitchell being something close to fully healthy for a season and continuing to develop. Same goes for Sal Frelick. Tyler Black maybe actually getting some playing time and showing, why he is listed as a top prospect. It's Rhys Hoskins bouncing back kind of from what was, I think you have to admit, was a disappointing 2024. After all, that's why he opted back into his contract. I think most people think things are going to have to go right again for the Brewers in 2025. So what can they do then to bolster that roster as much as they can so that if a couple of those things that need to go right go wrong, they're not stuck, at the bottom of the division or something.
Eric Haas is coming back on a $1.3 million contract for 1 year. They avoid some negotiations with him and arbitration and all that, and they agree to a deal. I love his bat. I don't mind seeing his bat in the lineup. I just got some question marks about his defense.
Yeah, and we really didn't get a whole lot of a chance to see that last year because he only played 30 games. He played some DH in there every once in a while because the Brewers had three catchers. You had Gary Sanchez, who's gone now, and William Contreras, who's your starting guy. So I think that's another area that the Brewers have been really successful in is turning average to below average defensive catchers into at least competent defensive catchers behind the plate. And I guess I haven't heard either way really with Eric Haas. I haven't heard that he's particularly great, but also not particularly horrible. So as long as the Brewers can keep him functional back there, you'll take that bat. I mean, in those few games that he played, after a really, really good spring, he comes in and proves that it's no fluke once he finally gets on the active roster, has over an 800 OPS, ends up with, it was 5 homers in 30 games. Like he was on a decent rate there. It'll be worth it. And that's exactly what you wanted now that Jefferson Carroll is going to be back healthy, finally now getting that first year in AAA. You want him to get some action there before he ends up in the big leagues. Bringing back Haas allows you to do exactly that.
Well, when they got him early in the offseason last year in the Canada deal from Detroit, I thought he was going to be the backup catcher. Then they went out and got themselves Gary Sanchez. I wonder if they look at him as being the backup this time, or are they still going to go out and get themselves another backup to Contreras?
Yeah, to me, I think They did with Caratini leaving prior to last year. They needed someone in that backup spot. They had the opportunity to bring in Haas. They did it. I remember writing that article. Brewers signed their backup catcher. And then they end up getting the opportunity with Gary Sanchez too. I don't know if maybe they didn't expect that and figured, you know what, we need offense. Our offense wasn't very good in 2023. So let's bring in Sanchez as well and see how it all works out. And you know what, you can never have too many people at any one position, especially going into the spring. The Brewers kind of proved that because they ended up needing all of that. They had Haas audition very well, stay with the organization, and then come up when Sanchez gets hurt. So I think it was more just giving themselves options now. And with Haas, he always had that potential that he wasn't going to be able to bounce back. He had a very bad season the year before the Brewers brought him in. So if he came in and wasn't very good in the spring, well, now you're kind of screwed at your backup catcher position. So I think it was as much about that, giving themselves insurance for Haas not bouncing back, as it was about bringing in Sanchez himself. But now you know what you have in Haas. And so I would think they feel more comfortable.
Who's going to make a move on the Brewers in the division? We'll get to that coming up next, if anybody. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Game time, you want tickets for a upcoming sporting event, maybe a concert, you name it, in maybe theater, comedy club, whatever. All those tickets right on Game Time. Game Time is so easy to use. All-in pricing, toggling that all-in pricing feature shows all the totals up front. So it's not like you say you're going to pay $30 for a ticket and then by the end of it, it comes like $93. No, they show all the fees up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. The panoramic view from the seat in the app before you buy is so clutch. It is, because you can see exactly where you're going to sit from all the venues in the state of Wisconsin. Lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the deal, of the difference. Super, super deals. So, I mean, forget everybody else. Go to Game Time, and especially with this offer right here. Game Time, you got to download the Game Time app. You create an account, and then use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. When you use that promo code LOCKEDONMLB, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. So maybe you're going to spend $75 on Bucks tickets. Well, you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Say you pay $100, $80 worth of tickets. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It is Game Time. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, and our guest. Our guest is Matt Carroll. He is from justbaseball.com. Great new home for Matt Carroll, who's been a friend of the show over the years here on Locked On Brewers. All right, the Brewers are the kings of the NL Central right now. Who's going to be, and it's still early in the season, but who would be your guest to be the challengers for the throne?
Oh, I hate speaking this name out loud, but it's hard to not say that the Cubs will have a chance here again next year. Got to kind of see what's going to happen with them. I know they're apparently shopping Bellinger around a little bit, so don't know if they'll keep him, what they might get in return if they do move him. But they have one of the best farm systems in all of baseball, and so they've got strong depth. The starting pitching, you wonder a little bit with them again, if it'll be able to hold them up, but I think they have enough there where the Brewers, that's who their main rival is going to be. With the other three, though, they've all got chances of their young talent clicking and having them go on a run. You saw late with the Cardinals last year, guys like Mason Wynn, and some of their other youngsters kind of carrying them through and starting to make a run before they kind of faded late. The Pirates sort of started doing that a little bit. And, they've obviously got the reigning rookie of the year there now. Paul Skeens leading the way, as well as some other young guys. And the Reds, they have a strong young core. It's been 2 years now that people keep saying, oh yeah, these young guys are going to help them lead the way. And then they either get injured or fall short or whatnot, but there's always that threat there that they could finally put it together, especially when you have an exciting guy to watch like Ellie De La Cruz. I think the Cubs I would put, I guess, above the other three. But truly, when you take into account that it's the youth movement for all those teams that could lead the way, anything could truly happen.
Yeah. If you could trade Chourio for Paul Skeens, would you do it? Hypothetically.
I wouldn't, and it's just because you're going to get Chourio for 130, 140 games, making an effect.
Okay.
Not that it's not important to have a front line, top of the line starter,
one of the best ever
Chourio
in Pirate history. Bring it, man.
Oh, he's fun to watch, and I'll watch a little LSU baseball here and there too, and so I'd watch him a little bit in college, and I mean, come on, like the guy's electric. I totally get it, but the other thing too is guys with that throw with that velocity, whether they're a starter or a reliever, how long is that body going to hold up versus an outfielder like Chourio? You expect he can play years and years and years for the Brewers. So I'll still stick with Chourio, but I'll have fun watching Skeens as long as he's not playing Milwaukee.
Take that we're Brewer fans out of the mix. Would you trade Chourio for Paul Skeens? Nobody wants to trade Chourio, but if you weren't a Brewer fan,
I'm still going Chourio just for that. Like I said, that consistency. I know he's going to be able to play for years. I know he's going to affect a lot of games. I'm still going Chourio. Brewers out of it. I promise.
Hey man, have a great holiday. Thanks for coming on the show. Great.
Yeah, anytime.
Good information. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on in the winter here when snow starts to fall even more than it is right now. So
for sure.
Have a great Thanksgiving, my man. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
All right, that is Matt Carroll from his new site that he is on, Just Baseball. Lots of baseball. He's talking baseball, a lot of Brewer baseball. JustBaseball.com. You'll find Matt Carroll. My name is Chuck Freeman. You find me on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen to every day. And on your second listen, go to Locked On MLB. My guy, Sully, has all the hot stove look around the league. You get it right there on Locked On MLB. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Good night, everybody.